So well, let's just get into it. Why don't you tell us, for all of the many thousands of people across the world listening to the podcast or watching it, what's your background in property? How did you get started? How long have you been in property? All of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I've actually been working in the industry in total for about 25 years now. So I've done a bit of everything in terms of property, in some capacity. But I kind of fell into it. So I left university, I studied business studies and marketing, and I immediately joined a property management company in their marketing department. So I kind of loved that side of the business, and I suppose that's where I initially got the property bug. And after a couple of years, an opportunity came up to join a property company that really specialised in property investment. And that's, I suppose, the sector that I really wanted to get into after the couple of years of kind of experience in it. And at the time I joined that company, it was really small. There was just 12 of us. And by the time I left, 21 years later, we had 65 staff located all throughout the UK. So yeah, it was a very steep learning curve over those 21 years. And being a small business, you were kind of pulled into every side of the business. So it was a great experience for me.
Excellent. Okay, and I was doing the intro before and just sort of saying that I guess one of the topics we'll be focusing on a bit is the strategy that is the BRRRR strategy. So the buy, refurbish, refinance, rent out, repeat. There's another R in there. And it is, it's one of the most sort of popular property strategies, I think, and you guys will vouch for that because it's a great way to, maximize, pull cash out of deals and go again. You don't need to be putting fresh cash in all the time. And obviously you get a much higher yield. That's the strategy, and that is what you help clients do, overseas investors and people locally. So yeah, if you could tell us a bit about how you started the business and what you guys actually do, because you are helping people do this exact strategy. So yeah, if you could tell us a bit about that, I think that would be useful.
Perfect. Well, it was myself and two other co-founders, Anna Renton and Samantha Curran, who launched ARC Invest 2 years ago. And roughly 12 months later, we also launched ARC Property Management and Lettings, and that'll celebrate its 1 year anniversary come October. So over that kind of 2 year period in total, we've been lucky enough to grow the business very quickly, and we now manage about 400 properties across 8 university cities in the UK.
Wow.
And our business, as you say, is really to help clients get access to the UK residential market in a very hands-off way. So to that end, we source properties on behalf of clients, we then renovate them, we furnish them, and then we do the ongoing property management. So it's really offering clients that easy access without that direct involvement in kind of any part of that process. And really importantly, I suppose, we do all this in-house. So we want to give clients that peace of mind that we are fully accountable for delivering each part of that investment process. And on top of that, if clients need help with lending, legals, or even the tax side, we've got really trusted partners that we can refer them to on that side too.
Yeah, and I think that's when we sort of meet with fellow investors and everyone, expats certainly want to get into this way of this strategy, BRRRR, refurbing. It's sort of the thing that always comes up is that it is actually very, very hard to do, certainly from overseas and certainly if you've got no experience doing it. And one of the ways to counter that is to obviously go and do it yourself and try and get the experience yourself, or actually work with people that have contractors, that have building teams, that know which banks and lenders like lending on these types of properties and like lending to expats. So I think that's, you can bypass not having the experience by sort of doing it with a team such as yourselves, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that come with that, it's really important to know which type of properties fit this model best. So from our side, we really focus on buying these older traditional Georgian and Victorian properties in prime city centre locations, because we know they're a scarce resource, they're no longer built, they're in the best city centre locations. And really coupled, I suppose, the reason for those two things from an investment perspective is the prime location means your occupancy is going to be high, and also you've got that kind of best opportunity for future capital growth as well. Yeah,
so that was going to be, one of the questions. I think that's a good sort of bit of background on yourself and how you help and what we're going to be talking about. So let's, maybe get into a bit of the nitty-gritty on the properties, and hopefully this is stuff that people can, whether they work with you or go and do it themselves or whatever, that they can take away and implement. So what, in terms of locations, what makes a good quality location, specifically for your model, but maybe just more broadly, do you think for a buy-to-let or an investment property?
Yeah, well, for us, it's all about buying in prime city centre locations, and buying properties that are going to appeal to different rental markets as well. So for us, buying properties that will appeal to students is key, but also appeal to the young professional market is great as well, just so that you've got that, as I say, best opportunity for getting high occupancy. In addition to that, an important part of our model is to look for these properties that we can increase the rental yield and also the capital value in. So quite often we're looking for properties that have been neglected for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And we go in there with our team, and quite often we are relocating kitchens, bathrooms to create more bedrooms, so increasing the rental yield. And then with that, you're also increasing the capital value at the same time. So we're taking a prime property that might typically yield 3 or 4%, and we're converting it into something that's going to give you 8, 9, or even 10% yield through that renovation model. And in terms of the actual cities, I suppose, we're looking at Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee in Scotland, and Manchester in England is particularly key for us as well just now.
Yeah, and are you seeing a shift in the clientele? Because I know the sort of HMOs was very, HMO, house in multiple occupation, was very sort of student-centric focused for a long time, but sort of as rents have gone up and up and up, we've been seeing that it's becoming more of a market for professionals as well, who simply don't want to pay £1,500, I think, it's a record. Rents have hit record highs in August. So people that just don't want to pay that. So are you seeing now more young professionals and professional HMOs coming on board, or has that always been going on and I just haven't seen it?
Yeah, I think that's always been going on in the background, but I think, as you say, with the pressure on rents, etc., that is getting more common. I would say that typically our stock, though, is still predominantly renting to that student market, but we are seeing the professional numbers coming up. The professional stock that we can deal with is probably the more kind of 1 and 2 bedroom space. And again, just because prices are still high in the UK, what you find is that these professionals who've just left university, maybe year 1, year 2, are still renting for a number of years before they're actually getting on the property ladder, if they are at all.
When people think students, often there's a bit of a negative connotation with that, but I think with these, I don't know whether it's a Scottish specific rule, you can tell us more about it, but do the parents have to underwrite the contract? Or?
Yeah, that's right, but that applies all throughout the UK. So there's a couple of things, I suppose, from an HMO perspective that we do to de-risk that space. One is that with all of our properties, we only ever have one joint and several liability lease. So what that means is if you've got a 3, 4, or 5 bedroom house, is you have the number of tenants on the lease, so perhaps 5 people on the lease, but in addition to that, you have 5 guarantors, be that parents or another family member, who will guarantee that rent. So what that means is, from an investment perspective, is technically you've got 10 people to chase your rent every month for your rental payments, and 10 people who are responsible for that. So for that reason, our arrears are very low. So our arrears last month were under 2%. And that's not typical. So in a typical HMO, you rent out room by room, and then that increases the risk and increases your chance of default payments and your chance of lower occupancy as well.
So you're finding these properties where you can, move the kitchens around, add some bedrooms, increase the yield, increase the value. Would that, and I know you said maybe it would be neglected properties that haven't had much love, but could you do that with any sort of terraced house, or does it need to be a specific size or layout?
Yeah, no, that could work with anything. So even if it's in a semi-decent condition just now, but you just want to increase the yield in it, then of course just by moving the kitchen or a bathroom or something like that to create more bedrooms will increase the rental yield. So it works kind of in both spaces. But I suppose we are targeting the ones that have been neglected for a while, because then we can buy them at a much cheaper price. So it gives the client more chance for some equity. I suppose a good example of that actually is for a recent client, is we bought a property in Edinburgh, very close to the university. Client bought it for $290. We're spending about $60k on renovations. It'll be worth $385 when it's done. So the client's getting an immediate equity of $35k, which is great. And in addition to that, we're renting it for $2,400 a month, which gives an 8.2% yield, which is really fantastic for such a prime location in Edinburgh. So that's, I suppose, a live example of how kind of doing that refurb helps you release some equity, but then also gets you a really high yield at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, nice. And maybe we just talk through that one a little bit more to give
Yeah.
people an idea of how that works. So did the client buy with cash, do the refurb, and then pull cash out, or did they put deposit down, do the refurb, refinance? What did the sort of cash flow situation look like?
Yeah, so in this particular example, the client decided to go on a bridging loan to start with. So they put 25% deposit down on the 290 for the bridging. And our aim, obviously, through the renovations is to get the renovations done as quickly as possible. So we then get him off that bridge and get him onto the long-term loan. And then when he comes off of that long-term loan and refinances up to the 385, so he takes his buy-to-let mortgage out on the 385, he's then releasing the capital that he's kind of made over that renovation piece. So it's kind of a two-phase process.
Coming off the bridge, then you'd go onto a standard buy-to-let, and then that's when you
Yeah.
would release the extra.
Yeah, cash.
And that's
Yeah.
that's the second R in the BRRR. Buy, refurbish, refinance to pull out,
Refinance.
and then repeat. So anyone that is new to it, that's what it means when we say refinance. And then for anyone that doesn't know, a bridge is a bridge. Bridge is from one thing to another. It's a short-term mortgage, basically, isn't it? Usually for
Yeah.
up to 9 months, 12 months, I think.
Yeah, generally, so we kind of take the bridge out for 12 months, but then it just reduces on how much you use it, basically. So we will keep that down for as low as possible.
You mentioned some different locations there. What sort of budgets, if you're working on a 25% deposit as opposed to cash, 25% with your refurb costs, what sort of budgets are you looking at to get started in the BRRR approach in different areas? And this is, would apply to people working with yourselves and people doing it on their own, because you're always going to need that 25% and you're always going to need the money to do the refurb, right? So what sort of amounts are we looking at in these different locations?
So we say generally clients need around about £75,000 cash to kind of do business with us. And what that includes is 25% deposit on the property. It includes your full refurb costs. It'll also include any stamp duty, furnishings, all that kind of stuff. So kind of everything you need to get the property up and running. And then after kind of you're doing your refinance at the end, there could be an opportunity to get, kind of talking rough numbers, maybe 25,000 of that back. But from a cash flow perspective, just to pay for the renovations up front, we see about 75,000 in liquid cash. And that would get you a 1-2 bedroom property in a city like Dundee, so prime city centre or West End location in Dundee, and get you a yield of around about 9, perhaps even up to 10%.
Yeah, it's very high yielding. Dundee.
Yeah.
What are some of the fundamentals you think that makes Dundee a good, over, because everyone would know Edinburgh, why that's good, or Manchester or Glasgow, but Dundee, and you can get some of the highest yields there and better value, but what are the fundamentals that make it a good place to buy?
Yeah, there's quite a few actually. So there's 2 universities in Dundee. You've got a huge waterfront regeneration programme going on, which is one of the biggest in the UK. Recently built the Victoria and Albert Museum up there. You've got some of the big headquarters moving up there, so for instance BT. And it's also really, really popular from a tech perspective. So you have a lot of the tech companies that kind of are based just outside Dundee. And we actually do a lot of company lets to these guys who are bringing workers in from the likes of India, just to kind of fulfill the demand that they've got up there. And yeah, the tech businesses are really doing fantastic in that area, and it's one of the most popular reasons a lot of businesses relocate up there.
Okay, so good tenants then. All right, let's get into some sort of maybe best and worst buys, whether this is what you've seen through the business or just your years in property or with your personal property. So the best, and I say let's classify or define what the best is. I guess the most money made and the highest yield, and then maybe look at the worst, what was one that you thought would be a great buy and actually turned out to not be for whatever reason. And there might be none of those, and that's fine. So let's go with the best one first, maybe.
Yeah. I think it's a very subjective thing also when you're talking about the best, because clients quite often want different things. So the best could be highest yielding for some clients, or it could be the one that's going to give the most equity. I think the example actually I've just given of having a property where you're getting really high yields, 8% plus a decent amount of equity back, is a really good example and something recent that we've done, that particular one in Edinburgh. So there's lots of those in terms of, we just got another one on Clark Street that had a similar amount of equity and maybe slightly less yield. I think it's coming in about 8%, but those kind of deals are great to do, and they're not easy to come by. So finding the best ones are very difficult. But for us, it's finding that needle in the haystack. Do you know what I mean? We might bid on 20 or 30 properties to get the right one, but we know that when we do, it's an absolute kind of gold mine, and yeah, it will work all day long. So in terms of the worst, previous company I worked for, we had a lot of clients that were based in Aberdeen in Scotland. So by default, they were kind of interested in the oil and gas sector, etc. there. And we had actually decided as a company not to invest in that city purely because of its volatility and links to that market. But we had quite a lot of clients who, as I said, kind of had some emotional attachments to the city, and they really wanted us to invest there because the market was booming and had boomed for a number of years previously. So we bought a few buy-to-lets for them. Needless to say, a few years later, unfortunately, the oil prices did crash. And the whole kind of Aberdeen market crashed in terms of values and therefore rents. And unfortunately, it's just never recovered as to what it was before. So I think the learning for us is to make sure we're investing in cities that have a really strong kind of economic background and are not reliant too much on one sector. So that's kind of why I mentioned earlier, make sure you're buying something that your tenant profile can be varied if it has to, just in case there is a change in the market.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point is, why you do need to, and that's why bigger cities always do so well, because you've got such a varied tenant pool, so many different employers, so many different types of people that would want to rent. When you're buying something that is so closely tied to a specific industry in Aberdeen, oil and gas, because of the rigs they've got offshore. So when it's booming, prices are doing well, everyone's earning loads of money, buying things. But as you say, the bottom fell out of it. And that's why I think it's similar with holiday lets. Why would you buy something that's only going to be used in a high season for holiday lets, or in summertime? You're sort of hamstringing yourself on what you can get out of it. So I think, that's really important for people to understand. And I think your other point as well, the subjectivity of it all, because everyone has got different goals. And as you say, one person might be trying to achieve a yield, one person might be trying to achieve growth. So you need to be clear on that at the start, because there's so many different ways to make money in property, BRRRR, standard buy-to-let, let-to-let, holiday lets, whatever it may be. So I think what you just said was very good advice, but what advice would you give someone, or what pearls of wisdom would you give to someone that is just sort of saying, right, I want to get started on my property journey, I've got no experience, what do I do, how do I do it?
I think for me, it doesn't matter what budget you've got. I think with the cash you've got, just buying the best location that you possibly can. It's the old saying, location, 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 but it does always prove to be right. At the end of the day, you want something that people are going to want to live in. You're going to want your occupancy to be high, and you want something that, should you need to exit, that you can sell quickly. So whatever your budget, just buy in the best possible location that you can.
Yeah, I think that's solid advice, and don't always chase the highest yield. I don't think, buy good quality property, because that attracts good quality tenants.
I think people can be swayed a bit by some very high yielding numbers that they see, and for us and for me, from doing it for such a long time, if it's got a crazy high yield, there'll be a reason for it, and that tends to be that it's in a secondary location, or so I think always do your digging and do your due diligence. If something seems too good to be true, then it probably is. For
sure, yeah. And then you sort of look at, okay, you get somewhere that's high yielding, but it's not a great location, the tenants aren't great, what's the real cost then of changing tenants or having to do repairs, and actually then your real yield becomes much lower. So what you want, especially if you're overseas, is something that you can put a tenant in for a year, and then in a year's time they say, I want to stay, and then it's just full and paying the mortgage down for you. So what have you found then over your years in the market in property, what's got easier for you from a business perspective and maybe from a personal perspective with property?
I think just with experience, everything gets easier. So when we're out sourcing properties for now, just now, for instance, I can really tell immediately when we go in if it's going to work or not within a couple of minutes of being in it. And I think, yeah, as the years go on, that just gets stronger. And that's really where our clients come to us at the end of the day, because we know the markets we're in inside out and back to front. We know the streets that work and the streets that next to that don't work. So yeah, the experience thing definitely makes everything a lot easier.
I think it's very true. You know, when I first started, I bought a lot of off-plan stuff because I found it was easier for cash flow and all of that sort of stuff. And now I can tell just by looking at something, as you said, you know, whether it's a good quality product or not. And it's just small things a lot of the time. What's got harder then? Have you found anything has got more difficult, maybe managing the clients, or, you know, what's got more difficult?
I think from a market perspective, lending has definitely got harder in the last 20 years when we first started. There's different, obviously, kind of regulations that have come in place. But I mean, even today, when we take clients to the brokers, there's no one that we've came across that we haven't managed to be able to help. It's just there's maybe a couple of more extra hoops to go through that we didn't have to go through before, but it tends to all come good in the end.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can always get a mortgage right. As you say, you maybe just need to jump through a few more hoops or go to some different lenders. All right, and what about buying locations over the next 5 years? Do you see anywhere sort of standing out, or will you stick to the fundamentals of good quality prime cities with good employers? Or is there anywhere that's going to sort of boom, because everyone's always looking for places that are going to boom?
For me personally, I can't see anything fundamentally changing in the cities that we're currently in, because we do, as you say, have a strong pool of tenants being students and young professionals. But yeah, we're always on the lookout for the next best location as well, and we do kind of in-depth research on any new cities that we're planning to go into. There's lots that goes with that. It's not just who your tenant's going to be, it's what are the planning regulations, what are the HMO regulations, etc. So it takes a long while for us to launch a new city, but we're always on the lookout for what's next.
And are you just on your sort of research there, you know, where do you get your research to stay up to date? You know, are there sort of reports or subscriptions, or, you know, or is it all sort of done boots on the ground, walking around, speaking to agents? You know, where do you get that information from?
Yeah, I mean, we do use all the major portals that anyone would use for Rightmove, etc. But as you say, the most important information from us comes from boots on the ground. So it's chatting to agents every day, surveyors, tenants, and therefore we get to know what's happening in real time, so we don't have to wait for any reports to come out, because we know what's happening in the city kind of day to day, week to week. And again, that's the huge value add for our clients, is having those boots on the ground and hearing about it before kind of anyone else does in terms of what changes might be coming up.
And again, I think that's key, you know, it's difficult to do from overseas, and, you know, there's two routes. You've either got to go and get the experience and invest the time and do it yourself, or you bypass that and you work with people that, you know what they're doing and have the experience. Is there anything else you would like to cover?
No, I think that's it. I think we've gone through.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll say goodbye.